The Lightning Thief, Chapter 8. We Capture a Flag. The next few days I settled into a routine that felt almost normal, if you don't count the fact that I was getting lessons from satyrs, nymphs, and a centaur. Each morning I took ancient Greek from Annabeth, and we talked about the gods and goddesses in the present tense, which was kind of weird. I discovered Annabeth was right about my dyslexia. Ancient Greek wasn't that hard for me to read, at least no harder than English. After a couple of mornings I could stumble through a few lines of Homer without too much of a headache. The rest of the day I'd rotate through outdoor activities, looking for something I was good at. Sharon tried to teach me archery, but we found out pretty quick I wasn't any good with a bow and arrow. He didn't complain even when he had to de-snag a stray arrow out of his tail. Foot racing, no good either. The wood nymph instructors left me in the dust. They told me not to worry about it. They'd had centuries of practice running from lovesick gods. But still, it was a little humiliating to be slower than a tree. And wrestling? Forget it. Every time I got on that mat, Clarice would pulverize me. "There's more where that came from, punk," she'd mumble in my ear. The only thing I was really excelling at was canoeing, and that wasn't the kind of heroic skill people expected to see from a kid who had beaten the Minotaur. I knew the senior campers and counselors were watching me, trying to decide who my dad was, but they weren't having an easy time of it. I wasn't as strong as the Ares kids, or as good at archery as the Apollo kids. I didn't have Hephaestus' skill with metalwork, or, God forbid, Dionysus' way with vine plants. Luke told me I might be a child of Hermes, a kind of jack-of-all-trades, master of none, but I got the feeling he was just trying to make me feel better. He really didn't know what to make of me either. Despite all that, I liked camp. I got used to the morning fog over the beach, the smell of the hot strawberry fields in the afternoon, even the weird noises of monsters in the woods at night. I would eat dinner with Cabin 11, scrape part of my meal into the fire, and try to feel some connection to my real dad. Nothing came. Just that warm feeling I'd always had, like the memory of his smile. I tried not to think too much about my mom, but I kept wondering, if gods and monsters were real, if all this magical stuff was possible, surely there had to be some way to save her, to bring her back. I started to understand Luke's bitterness and how he seemed to resent his father, Hermes. So okay, maybe gods had important things to do, but couldn't they call once in a while, or thunder or something? Dionysus could make Diet Coke appear out of thin air. Why couldn't my dad, whoever he was, make a phone appearance? Thursday afternoon, 3 days after I arrived at Camp Half-Blood, I had my first sword fighting lesson. Everybody from Cabin 11 gathered in a big circular arena where Luke would be our instructor. He started with basic stabbing and slashing, using some straw-stuffed dummies and Greek armor. I guess I did okay. At least I understood what I was supposed to do, and my reflexes were good. The problem was I couldn't find a blade that felt right in my hands. Either they were too heavy, or too light, or too long. Luke tried his best to fix me up, but he agreed that none of the practice blades seemed to work for me. We moved into dueling pairs. Luke announced he would be my partner since this was my first time. "Good luck," one of the campers told me. "Luke's the best swordsman in the last 300 years. "Well, maybe he'll go easy on me then," I said. The camper snorted. Luke showed me thrusts and parries and shield blocks the hard way. With every swipe I got a little more battered and bruised. "Keep your guard up, Percy," he'd say. Then he'd whap me in the ribs with the flat of his blade. "No, not that far up. Whap, lunge, whap. Now back, whap." By the time he called a break, I was soaked in sweat. Everybody swarmed the drinks cooler. Luke poured ice and water on his head, which looked like it was such a good idea I did the same. Instantly I felt better. Strength surged back into my arms. The sword didn't feel so awkward. "Okay, everybody, circle up," Luke ordered. "If Percy doesn't mind, I want to give you a little demo." Great, I thought. Let's all watch Percy get pounded. The Hermes guys gathered around. They were suppressing smiles. I figured they'd be in my shoes before, and couldn't wait to see how Luke used me for a punching bag. He told everybody he was going to demonstrate a disarming technique, how to twist the enemy's blade with the flat of your own sword so that he had no choice but to drop his weapon. This is difficult, he stressed. I've had it used against me. No laughing at Percy now. Most swordsmen have to work many years to master this technique. He demonstrated the move on me in slow motion. Sure enough, the sword clattered out of my hand. Now in real time, he said, after I retrieved my weapon. We kept sparring until one of us pulls it off. Ready, Percy? I nodded and Luke came after me. Somehow I kept him from getting a shot at the hilt of my sword. My senses opened. I saw his attacks coming. I countered. I stepped forward. I tried to thrust my own. Luke deflected it easily, but I saw a change in his face. His eyes narrowed, and he started to press me with more force. The sword grew heavy in my hand. The balance wasn't right. I knew it was only a matter of seconds before Luke took me down, so I figured, hey, what the heck? I tried the disarming maneuver. My blade hit the base of Luke's and I twisted, putting my whole weight into a downward thrust. Clang. Luke's sword rattled against the stones. The tip of my blade was an inch from his undefended chest. The other campers were silent. I lowered my sword. Sorry. For a moment, Luke was too stunned to speak. Sorry? His scarred face broke into a grin. By the gods, Percy, why are you so sorry? Show me that again. I didn't want to. The short burst of manic energy had completely abandoned me, but Luke insisted. This time there was no contest. The moment our swords connected, Luke hit my hilt and sent my weapon skidding across the floor. After a long pause, somebody in the audience said, "Beginner's luck." Luke wiped the sweat off his brow. He appraised at me with an entirely new interest. Maybe, he said. But I wonder what Percy could do with a balanced sword. Friday afternoon, I was sitting with Grover at the lake, resting from a near-death experience on the climbing wall. Grover had scampered to the top like a mountain goat, but the lava had almost gotten me. My shirt had smoking holes in it. The hairs had been singed off my forearms. We sat on the pier watching the naiads do underwater basket weaving until I got up the nerve to ask Grover how his conversation had gone with Mr. D. His face turned a sickly shade of yellow. Fine, he said. Just great. So your career's still on track? He glanced at me nervously. Sharon told you I want a searcher's license? Well, no. I had no idea what a searcher's license was, but it didn't seem like the right time to ask. He just said you had big plans, you know, and that you needed credit for completing a keeper's assignment. So, did you get it? Grover looked down at the naiads. Mr. D suspended judgment. He said I hadn't failed or succeeded with you yet, so our fates are still tied together. If you got a quest and I went along to protect you and we both came back alive, then maybe he'd consider my job complete. My spirits listed. Well, that's not so bad, right? Mwah. He might as well have transferred me to stable cleaning duty. The chances of you getting a quest, and even if you did, why would you want me along? Of course I'd want you along. Grover stared glumly into the water. Basket weaving. Must be nice to have a useful skill. I tried to reassure him that he had lots of talents, but that just made him look more miserable. We talked about canoeing and swordplay for a while, then debated the pros and cons of different gods. Finally I asked him about the 4 empty cabins. Number 8, the silver one, belongs to Artemis, he said. She vowed to be a maiden forever, so of course no kids. The cabin is, honorary. If she didn't have one, she'd be mad. Yeah, okay, but the other 3, the ones at the end, are those the big 3? Grover tensed. We were getting close to a touchy subject. No, one of them, number 2, is Hera's, he said. That's another honorary thing. She's the goddess of marriage, so of course she wouldn't go around having affairs with mortals. That's her husband's job. When we say big three, we mean the three powerful brothers, the sons of Kronos. Zeus, Poseidon, Hades. Right. You know, after the great battle with the Titans, they took over the world from their dad and drew lots to decide who got what. Zeus got the sky, I remembered. Poseidon the sea, Hades the underworld. Uh-huh. But Hades doesn't have a cabin here. No. He doesn't have a throne on Olympus either. He sort of does his own thing down in the underworld. If he did have a cabin here... Ugh, Grover shuddered. Well, it wouldn't be pleasant. Let's leave it at that. But Zeus and Poseidon, they both had like a bazillion kids in myths. Why are their cabins empty? Grover shifted his hooves uncomfortably. About 60 years ago, after World War II, the Big Three agreed they just wouldn't sire any more heroes. Their children were just too powerful. They were affecting the course of human events too much, causing too much carnage. World War II, you know, that was basically a fight between the sons of Zeus and Poseidon on one side and the sons of Hades on the other. The winning side, Zeus and Poseidon, made Hades swear an oath with them, no more affairs with mortal women. They all swore on the river Styx. Thunder boomed. I said, "That's the most serious oath you can make." Grover nodded. "And the brothers kept their words? No kids?" Grover's face darkened. 17 years ago, Zeus fell off the wagon. There was this TV starlet with big fluffy 80s hairdo. He just couldn't help himself. When their child was born, a little girl named Thalia, well, the river Styx is serious about its promises. Zeus himself got off easy because he's immortal, but he brought a terrible fate on his daughter. But that isn't fair. It wasn't the little girl's fault. Grover hesitated. Percy, children of the Big Three have powers greater than other half-bloods. They have a strong aura, a scent that attracts monsters. When Hades found out about the girl, he wasn't too happy about Zeus breaking his oath. Hades let the worst monsters out of Tartarus to torment Thalia. A satyr was assigned to be her keeper when she was 12, but there was nothing he could do. He tried to escort her here with a couple of other half-bloods she'd befriended. They almost made it. They got all the way to the top of that hill. He pointed across the valley to the pine trees where I'd fought the Minotaur. All three kindly ones were after them, along with a horde of hellhounds. They were about to be overrun when Thalia told her satyr to take the other two half-bloods to safety while she held off the monsters. She was wounded and tired, and she didn't want to live like a hunted animal. The satyr didn't want to leave her, but he couldn't change her mind, and he had to protect the others. So Thalia made her final stand alone at the top of the hill. As she died, Zeus took pity on her. He turned her into that pine tree. Her spirit still helps protect the borders of the valley. That's why the hill is called Half-Blood Hill. I stared at the pine in the distance. The story made me feel hollow and guilty, too. A girl my age had sacrificed herself to save her friends. She had faced a whole army of monsters. Next to that, my victory over the Minotaur didn't seem like much. I wondered if I'd acted differently. Could I have saved my mother? Grover, I said, have heroes really gone on quests to the underworld? Sometimes, he said. Orifice, Hercules, Houdini. And have they ever returned somebody from the dead? No, never. Orifice came close. Percy, you're not seriously thinking. No, I lied. I was just wondering, so a Saturn is always assigned to guard a demigod? Grover studied me warily. I hadn't persuaded him that I'd really dropped the underworld idea. Not always. We go undercover to a lot of schools. We try to sniff out the half-bloods who have the makings of great heroes. If we find one with a strong aura, like the child of the Big Three, we alert Charon. He tries to keep an eye on them since they could cause really huge problems.